So before we get it started with our assembly of our female pipe thread Cuptisserie base unit kit, let's go over the inventory of what you should have in your kit. First thing you should have is a rotisserie motor mount plate. Then you should have a couple of shaft gears, 2 of them. You should have a rotisserie shaft gear. You should have a back plate. You should have a front plate, easy to identify with this little hole that's engraved in the acrylic. You should have 8 acrylic spacers. You should have 2 slip rings. You should have 4 pieces of PVC 3/4 inch pipe. You should have 4 slip 3/4 inch coupler to male pipe thread 3/4 inch. And you should have 2 female pipe thread to female pipe thread coupler made out of PVC 3/4 inch with a piece of acrylic bonded to it. You should have a grease brush. You should have a vial of synthetic grease that's food safe. You should have 8 number 6 nuts. You should have a piece of 5/16 square shaft. You should have 8 number 6 washers and 8 number 6 screws, 632 screws, and then the baggie that all the small pieces came in. Alright, let's get started with assembly. Alright, so the first thing we're going to assemble are the shaft gears. And for this you're going to need the 2 slip rings, the 2 shaft gears, and then the 2 female pipe thread to female pipe thread 3/4 inch couplers with the acrylic bonded to them. Go ahead and set everything else aside. And then you're going to need some super glue. Right here I have some basic Harbor Freight super glue. And let's get started with this section of it. So I paused the camera there so I could readjust the focus and then the zoom. So the first thing you're going to want to do for these, this is a lot different than the original base unit Cuptisserie kit, is you're going to want to peel the paper from these 2 gears. And I'm going to pause the video and then I'm going to restart it and speed this section up so you don't have to sit there and watch this in slow motion. Alright, so this is going to set up a bit. Alright, so now that we have the paper peeled off of these, this is what you're going to do. You're going to have these 4 little bumps that go around this threaded piece of PVC coupling. You're going to face that upwards on both of these. You're going to take your super glue and put on basically a little tiny bubble of it at each bump and then in between each bump. Just a little tiny amount of it. Do that on both sections. Then you're going to take your PVC gear and drop it on top of that. And just set it aside. Go ahead and do the same for the other section. And then you're going to repeat the gluing process, putting glue at roughly the same spots. You just put it on the bottom piece on top of the gear. There should be roughly 8 drops of glue on there. Just keep your gear flat at this point. And then you're going to take your slip rings and drop them right on top of that. And then you're going to set these guys aside. And you want to check the time. And you're going to wait at least an hour before you touch these guys again after you've set them aside. So let's be patient with these and let them cure. So we're going to go set those aside. And in the meantime, you can continue peeling all your paper off of all of your spacers, your rotisserie motor mount. I mean, it won't take an hour for you to do that, but it'll give you something to do in between. So I'm going to pause the video so we can speed this section up. And then we're going to go ahead and peel all the paper off of this and speed it up. Alright, so that took about 10 minutes to do for me. So the next thing, you don't have to do this step, but I find it makes it easier for assembly and disassembly, is we take the number 6 washers, our super glue, and our acrylic spacers, and we line up all of our washers on our acrylic spacers with the hole, and you take a screw and just kind of center it. Make sure that the washer is centered over the hole. And then you take a little bit of super glue and just put a drop on each piece of acrylic right next to the washer. Make sure it's touching the acrylic and the washer. And then go and repeat for the opposite side. And if your washer slips and it's no longer lined up with the hole, this is the time when you can break it free really easily before the super glue sets up by just taking a screw. This one right here slipped a little bit, sticking it down in the hole and kind of pushing the washer and breaking the super glue bond, and then letting it just set up again. That one slipped too, I think. No, it didn't. And it's okay if they're not perfectly lined up because there's plenty of space for the screw to fit through there. But like I said, you don't have to do this step. It just makes it a little more difficult for assembly and disassembly because now you have to float this washer with the acrylic. But I find this to be the easier step to do. So I'm going to let those set up. We're going to let the gears set up. And we got about 45 minutes to wait. So I'll get back to you guys in about 45 minutes. All right, another thing we can do while we're waiting for that super glue to cure is we can start to test our rotisserie motor and then assemble it to the mount plate. So you're going to want to plug it in after you take it out of the box and just make sure that it works. Turn it on and just let it run for like 20-30 minutes. And then after you're done testing it, you're going to unplug it. Make sure you unplug it. And then we're going to take these 3 screws out, take this plate off, and those 3 spacers out. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So there's that plate. We're not going to need that anymore. We're going to keep the 3 screws. You don't need these 3 spacers anymore. I would throw them in the box that it came from Amazon just in case the motor has any kind of issues within the first 30 days. You can always return it on Amazon Prime. So one of the things I've noticed with these motors is they're not lubricated around where this bushing comes out of this plate. So you're going to want to lift this plate up and add a little bit of your synthetic grease. Got your little vial and then your brush, and just put a little tiny bit on the end of your brush here and just brush it around this and then right around the edge of the opening here. Doesn't need a whole lot. So what I found is some of these motors will moan because this bushing rubs against this plate while it's running on the Cuptisserie. So this will eliminate that moaning noise. So now you have your mount plate. There's the 3 holes that line up with the holes in the motor itself. Go ahead and start one screw. Start the next screw. And then start your last screw. Just make sure everything looks like it's lined up, and then screw them down. Not super tight, so when you get to the end of the screw where it meets the acrylic and then the motor, you just want to hold 2 fingers on your screwdriver and tighten it to 2 fingers of tightness. You don't want to over tighten it, so 2 fingers, that's it. And the screw should be flush with the acrylic plate. So that's that. And we still have some time to wait for the super glue to dry or cure, and I'll get back to you in a little bit. Oh, and when you're done using the grease brush with the grease, just stick it in the bag like this, and that way you're not putting grease everywhere, and it just keeps it nice and clean for your rest of your assembly. So we'll just set that aside. So here we are an hour later. One thing you want to do, make sure that your super glue did evaporate and set, is just check it. And it looks like this has not evaporated all the way. You just take a toothpick and then touch the edge of the super glue. Maybe another 20 minutes or 30 minutes and this stuff will finish evaporating and setting. So I'm just going to let those sit for a little while longer. Pretty sure they've set up on here and here. Just let them sit for a little while longer. Super glue can be rather quick or kind of slow, so just a little patience. Alright, so like another 10 minutes has gone by. Looks like the super glue has dried up and set now. So this is what we need to do. Next is get this stuff out of the way, and you can identify the front and back pieces. So this is the front piece where it has the little circle right here that's engraved on the inside of the acrylic. It's smooth and flat on the front, and then a little bump right here. You can see it right there. So you want the wording to face forward. That'll be the front piece. And then this is your back piece with the rotisserie holes in it. And what you want to do is line up your plates and make sure that these small holes are lined up where the rotisserie mount plate is. I did these offset just slightly intentionally so you don't put this together wrong with the rotisserie motor screws, so they only go one direction. I found that when I was taking them apart and putting them together a lot, when the holes were all symmetrical, I'd put this thing on backwards, and then the screws would be pressed against the plate. So this is an attempt to thwart that from happening. So now that you can make sure that your small holes around your rotisserie motor line up, you now know which direction these go on, and you want the wording to face forward. So place that way. And since this is the first time I'm putting the kit together, I forgot to throw in the little spring that goes behind the rotisserie bar, the little shaft that comes out of the motor. So this should be in your kit also. You're going to want to drop this little spring into the rotisserie motor hole, and then you take a rotisserie shaft and just stick it down that hole, and it should be springy. So you don't want to lose that spring. So you're going to set that down like this, and then you want to make sure that your rotisserie motor lines up with the holes. And then we're going to have to flip this one over too, but all these holes should line up like that. Now what you're going to do here is take your gears with your slip rings on them and just drop them into these holes. But before we finish putting it together, you're going to take your brush out of your bag and take your vial of grease and just get a little bit of grease on the end of the brush. Pick up one of the gears with the PVC pipe sticking out of it and run it around the edge of your slip ring on one side. Just make sure it's a nice thin coating around that. And then you're going to drop that into the hole with the grease facing towards the hole. Pick up the next gear and then do the same thing with the grease. Just a little bit of grease on there. Run it around the slip ring. Nice thin coating all the way around. And drop that into the hole with the grease facing down towards the hole. Next thing you're going to do is the top of the slip ring with it sticking up out of the hole. So you can just leave it mounted in the frame and just rotate it around. Put a nice thin layer on there. Same for the other gear. Nice thin layer on there. And then you're going to take your rotisserie gear, the one with the little square hole, and just drop it onto the square shaft, and then line up your gears right here. Now at this point, you're going to take some more grease and put it on your brush, and just go around and hit the teeth of the gears just very lightly. Don't want to get too much grease on the brush. If you do, just wipe it off into the little vial. You don't want to put an excessive amount of grease on here, just enough to lubricate the gears as they're rotating. And you just go around and hit all the teeth with a very small amount of grease. If you see, like, let's put too much on one of these gears. If you see too much on a gear like that, you can just brush it off with the brush and spread it around the other gears. That's pretty much all you need to do for these. And then stick your grease brush back into that plastic bag to keep from making a mess. And then the next thing you want to do is kind of just set all of these spacers with the washers on them over the holes very carefully. There should be 8 of these. And then you want to make sure that your plate is lined up the correct direction. So another way you can tell if it's the correct direction is the wording should be opposite of where the power cord comes out of the motor. And then you're going to take your 8 little number 632 screws, just drop them into each of the holes. And if you don't have a hole lined up, you can just take a toothpick and move the little spacer into position and then drop the screw through it. Sometimes you can just offset it with the screw too. And then you're going to take your number 6 nuts and just start them on the ends of each of the screws before you move the whole assembly. So you should get about 1 or 2 turns onto each nut. And then when you're tightening these, make sure that it's 2 fingers and that's it. No excessive tightening. Just 2 fingers, finger tight. So when the screw stops, just give it a little bit of a twist with 2 fingers. No need to make it super tight. Okay. Now that your unit's assembled, you want to test it to make sure everything's working correctly. So you can go ahead and plug it in, and then hit the on switch, and just let it run for a few minutes. And at this point we can take the cap and put it back on the grease vial if everything's running smoothly. Now, if you may have missed a step or you have a washer missing and you screwed it together, you may be pinching the gears, so just make sure all your washers are in between the front and back plate with the spacer. But this is pretty much how it would work. And then depending on how you're going to mount it, if you got the wood mount kit, you would remove the screws from these bottom ones and then put the wood mount kit in here. Or if you have the other options with the stand, the full stand, you would mount the full stand here. Or if you have the individual stands, that's another way to use it. So each one of those is an option, and that just concludes the assembly of the female pipe thread cuptisserie. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. I have more videos coming. And thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next video.